Gosh, well, if you speak to any news journalist about this year, they'll tell you that they're pretty exhausted and that it has been, and I hate using this word, but it's been unprecedented really for news when you think about it. We've had a war, we've had, what, three prime ministers, four chancellors, a new king, a huge funeral, a cost of living crisis. It's really hard to know where to start when you sum up the year. But I'm going to give you a moment on air for me, and it was one of the key moments, I think, in the downfall of Liz Truss. And the whole premiership of Liz Truss is just utterly bonkers, really. And I'm sure politics students will be learning about it for decades to come. We're going to hear so much, aren't we, on reflection of that very short period of time. But for me, one of the key moments came on air, and I think that's why I remember it so strongly. And we just launched the evening edition. So that's the show that I do 8 to 10, Monday to Thursday. And it came really early into the launch. And it all started, well, first of all, it started on the same day that the Home Secretary, the last time she was the Home Secretary anyway, Suella Braverman had resigned. There were lots of dissenting voices around Liz Truss and her government and the way it was going, and of course, huge questions over the economy as well. And Suella Braverman resigned, and there was a key vote on fracking, and there was a lot of debate. In fact, we've been covering this fracking vote because it was one of the early votes really for Liz Truss. We've been covering it all day on Times Radio in terms of whether it was going to be a confidence vote or not. Were Conservative MPs going to be, coerced really into voting with the government on it? And there was so much confusion. The debate took place during the day in the House, and then it came to the vote, which happened just as we were going on air. So just around about 8 o'clock from memory. And again, still tons of confusion about whether it was a confidence vote or not. So should all Tory MPs go with the government or not? And what ensued, and we were getting all of this through live on the show, were chaotic scenes. Some said bullying, some said, shouting, abusive shouting from the whips, but also rumours of other, quite prominent Tory MPs. Jacob Rees-Mogg's name was mentioned as well. I have to say, I'm not going to charge him with anything specific, but there were plenty of stories really coming through to us that it was utter bedlam in the voting lobby, as no one could quite work out what they had to do as a Tory MP. And we had Ian Murray, the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, on, Labour MP, and he called it warfare. He said that Tory MPs were being manhandled into the Yes lobby, and just described utter chaos. The Chief Whip, Wendy Morton, marched through the voting lobby apparently and resigned, as did her deputy. Then she unresigned. It was frantic, it was chaotic, and it really summed up what was happening behind the scenes and also the kind of political turmoil that we were going through. We had, as I said, accounts live on the air. We were trying to work out, along with the listeners really, what was going on. We were seeing a feed, seeing pictures coming through, hearing accounts, as we were trying to get to the bottom of it. And that, for me, that utter chaos and bedlam really summed up for me what was happening politically, and also that Liz Truss's journey was soon going to come to an end. And I think it was 5 days later that she ended up resigning. But to try and report on something like that live on air with a mixture of what on earth's going on and goodness me, it feels like the government's falling down here, was utterly incredible. It really was. My moment, I think, or certainly one of the things that I feel really privileged anyway, to do this past year and indeed years at Times Radio, is to hear stories from my guests. And I am, big into letting my guests do the talking. We can give them a bit of space and a bit of time to tell their story. And that also involves me trying to get behind campaigns and trying to make sure that we don't stop talking about certain stories as well, just because they're not necessarily top of the news agenda, for example. And long COVID is something that I've covered a lot on my show, and I've continued to cover over the last year. People still suffering the effects of contracting COVID now, years down the line, without enough support medically, financially. People have lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, they've had to change their occupation or leave work entirely. I spoke to a tennis player, a young tennis player, professional tennis player, who at the age of 18, 19 has had to give up on her career as a professional tennis player because she's in a wheelchair. And that's been a great passion of mine, to tell stories and to keep telling those stories really, and to not forget that people continue to live with the effects of huge events like COVID. If I'm to give you a highlight for the year, and it's quite a personal one, this one, it would be the European Championships this year and the Lionesses, the England women team, and what they demonstrated in winning that tournament. I delayed my holiday on the 31st of July to go to Wembley to watch England, the Lionesses, win the Euros. And it was incredible. I've worked in sport journalism and covered women's football for over 10 years, and that's been a big part of sort of my career before doing a lot of politics and news. And it was such a pivotal moment for me. You know, some of those England players, in fact, many of them I know and I've interviewed, and some of them carry the scars of prejudice. I have to say, you know, in their early careers, people questioning why they would want to be a footballer. Girls don't play football. You know, we still get that now. And they were also bearing the responsibility of those women that came before them that were either banned from playing or unable to reach the heights that our current Lionesses have. They were unable to gain that exposure or to have that platform. And these remarkable women, you know, many of them young women really to me, showed what resilience and what courage means, but also they showed us as a sporting team that they carry none of the weight of responsibility that we've seen from other sporting teams. I'm probably talking about the men's England football team here, although they are much better, I think, now. But the Lionesses are a great example of fearlessness and of determination and of not being worried about meeting expectations. And what they did at Wembley on that day, and I spoke to a few of them afterwards as well, it was incredible. It was incredible for sport, and it was incredible for women, and it was incredible for girls as well, who were able to see the result of something that would have been unimaginable decades earlier, maybe even a decade earlier. And being there in Wembley at that time was incredible for me, and that is a moment that I'll never forget from the year. And let's be honest, a huge tonic when you think about the political turmoil, the issues with the economy, the cost of living crisis, people really struggling, the war in Ukraine. It was a moment of tonic for me, so I'll never forget that.